So you're ready for your testing. The things I'm going to share are not going to necessarily be fun and pretty, but they are things you can get through. I'm going to be looking at my notes quite a bit through this because there's some detail I want to cover. There was a 2-day process. You fast the evening before each day. There were 13 appointments one day, 8 appointments the other. Before you go, they send you, I really want to print these out, as a detailed schedule of all your appointments. You're making notes on them, there's going to be some adjustments, and then a couple of maps of the hospital. And you want to be using those as you kind of go around. There are things like chest x-rays, EKGs, but most of the tests have to do with IVs and blood draws. And they take your blood pressure constantly before almost every appointment. You're checking blood pressure and monitoring that throughout. Interspersed throughout all these medical appointments, you're meeting with a bunch of people for consults. I've got a list here. You find out your nurse coordinator, get to discuss with them some things, how they're going. You meet the social worker, and one of the things that he highlighted for me was that I have to have advanced directives before they would do the surgery, encouraged to have a living will. And the advanced directives are, of course, if something were to happen to you during the surgery and you have to be put on a machine or you don't make it, what would be your choice for how that should be handled. And then you meet someone in finance department there. This is not the financial aid assistance. They encourage you to check with your health and life insurance providers and make sure you're either not going to get dropped or that your premiums won't increase. That's a possibility. The recipient of those kidney needs to get on Medicare within 6 months after the surgery in order for you to be covered for life if you were to have any problems or any kidney-related issues. Otherwise, you and your insurance are responsible for that. And then also you want to update all the beneficiaries in any financial account that you have. You meet with a nutritionist, and before you meet with them, they have you fill out a logbook journal of all of the things you drink and eat throughout a few days before. And you go over that with them, and they try to talk to you about a well-balanced diet. For me, it really was nothing more than sort of a grateful education on nutrition, which might be insightful to some people, but it did seem very obvious to me what you should do. She reminds you about reducing your protein, caffeine, alcohol, and sugar intake. The basic amount that you'll probably likely want to limit yourself is, for example, 1 coffee a day, 1 alcoholic drink a day, something like that. So you don't cut these things out completely necessarily, you don't have to, but you want to moderate them. And how you'll need to moderate protein as well, and not be able to use NSAID pain relievers. You also meet with a nephrologist, so the actual kidney doctor, who's not the surgeon, just a kidney doctor. She reviewed a lot of the blood work results that we had already collected and talked about any potential issues there. One of the things that she did a lot of was interview me with a lot of personal questions about my sexuality and my sex life. She was giggling the whole thing, probably realizing it's awkward for a lot of people, but just be straightforward and answer those questions. And you meet with the surgeon eventually too. In my case, he was very positive and was telling me that I was a really good age and I seemed to be in really good health. I recall he said the typical donor is around 55 and they like to see people a little bit younger but not too young. I was 42 at the time. So he seemed really positive and encouraging, kind of explained what the surgery would be like and answered any questions. I just remember ultimately, it is a bit frantic. I was running around from appointment to appointment with IVs everywhere. So they used both arms, the back of your hands, and the thing that makes it where you have to be flexible is they'll put an IV in you, and then they'll say, go ahead and go to your next appointment, but come back here right after that before you go to your other appointment, because then we got to do a blood draw. So you're constantly doing IVs and blood draws back and forth with different appointments. So you're walking around with all these IVs taped to you, and it literally got to the point where they would try to find a place, and they'd say, how many times have we used that? And they're like, oh, they stuck me there twice today. Okay, let's find another arm or another place. They do prioritize you for every appointment. You sign in and you sit down and they call you first. There was one appointment meeting surgeon where I sat and waited a little bit. But ultimately, you can tell like they got you on a strict schedule to try and get you through. Your care person has to be there, and I would really encourage you to have him come to some of these appointments, ideally all of them. It's nice even for the consults. Unfortunately, mine did not. He was out in the lobby working the entire time, and every appointment they would always ask, you got a care person, don't you? Or where's your care person? You're fine to go without them, but it is nice, particularly for a couple of the appointments were really tough. A couple of the IVs were pretty exhausting and tiring. I remember towards the end of, I think it it was the first day, I started feeling nauseous. I was going to vomit and almost felt like I was going to pass out while I was in one of the waiting rooms. Really nice to have somebody there with you. The worst appointment was the renal scan. They put the dye with contrast in you, and the nurse says it's going to feel a little warm, and I felt like I was flipping on fire. They're in, I think, an MRI machine. You can't move. I just remember thinking, this is way too hot. This can't be right. I wanted to scream and say, can we stop? But I just bored because I didn't want to risk the chance of having to do this again. And I remember getting out of that machine and telling her, it's an understatement to tell a patient that this is going to be warm. I felt like I was burning from the inside out. Maybe we won't have that reaction, I don't know, but I just remember that being very difficult. One of the other frustrating things is a really long IV test. I had to have an IV in me for quite a while, putting stuff in me, and then at the same time, I think drawing blood out. And it was really exhausting and painful. That first night, they called me and said that didn't take. And so I had to come in even earlier the next morning and redo that one. And you come in 8 o'clock till 5 is what to expect. I think the second day I got a little bit early. And the second day I had to come in an hour early because of redoing the test. So you want to be flexible. When you're really running around with these IVs in you and you're making adjustments to your really detailed schedule, you do get some of the results there. You do have to wait for some others. So obviously I wasn't excluded. And they did tell me that in order to continue, there were 2 things I had to address. One was blood pressure that kept on being elevated as I was getting it monitored. Another was that my liver was producing 2 enzymes at too high of a rate. That would be something that I'd have to work on. And you have some time. January was my initial call saying, hey, I'm interested in donating. And this was in March that I had the testing. And June was the surgery. So you have some time to work on these things. I found out that I was an actual blood type match with my sister. We were both O. One of us is positive, one's negative, I don't recall. So I was able to donate directly to her. If you're not a direct match, you can still donate. You would just have to donate to somebody else. And then they would find somebody's kidney to give to her. And they would do all the surgery the same day. Even if they had to fly your kidney, air carry your kidney to California, right, everything would be waiting and all set up. And they told me that they would be having it all done at the University of Gainesville. We would all do the surgery side by side. But that was something that I'll talk about in another video that I still considered doing, but that I was able to directly match with my sister. In the next video, I'll talk about some of the obstacles, the 2 that I just mentioned. There were a couple of other obstacles that came up that I had to work on. But just to give you some insight on the testing itself and kind of how it might be. It is exhausting. You definitely will not be able to drive home, work to your hotel. You're just going to be emotionally and physically drained. And so a care person there is essential, even if just to drive you. You can do it. It is not fun, but again, it's designed to try to rule you out and make sure they're not making a mistake and harming you in some way. And you will learn a lot more about your health, even if you're not able to donate. So hopefully that's a bit of insight for you for how the testing might go. Hey, I hope you've enjoyed this content. And I want to invite you to add comments below and join in on the conversation. I'd love to engage with you in that. Also, if you know anybody who is going through this process or even just thinking about it, I hope that you'll share with them these videos. And if you've gone through that yourself, I hope you're inspired maybe to create your own content and get out there information about what it's like. Again, I thank you and hope this has been of help to you.